So, we are finally in Season 5, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are asking, well, what is the meta? Well, let me start breaking down what the meta was before, and then where we're at now, and this is really going to be a lot of predictions, essentially. I did play a lot on the first day, and I actually am the world's first person to hit Diamond rank, so it was a long session, but I'm really glad I'm there, and I'm pretty confident I can start to kind of discuss what the meta is, and not only what worked for me, but what I felt was the biggest threat to me and my team. So let's start going over the previous season, which I'm pretty confident in saying was a double, medium, and heavy meta. I would say the second best would probably be HML. We did see stuff like Carnifex's team actually pull wins with HML, and Uni's team, again, pulling a win with HML in another tournament, but it was heavily dominated by double, medium, heavy. It was very easy to play around, and there was tons of kiting. So when it comes to specific play style, what are we playing? I think kiting is still in the meta. We still have a lot of stalling tactics. We still have a lot of brawling. These are all pretty common tactics. So in terms of how we're playing, we're still in that sort of plug meta, and that probably isn't going to go away. It is what it is. But when it comes to team comp, I believe in Season 5, the best team comp is HML. I feel like we are finally in a meta where it is really good to at least have that light on your team. The second best, in my opinion, is going to be medium, heavy, heavy. Now let me break down the reasons why. Now the first change that is really, really big to shaking up the meta is the Defibrillator chain. Adding a revive sickness has essentially removed chaining the Defibrillator, which I think is fantastic. I found the triple medium was really, really frustrating to face against. Even though it was relatively easy to beat, it was extremely frustrating, and I felt like the fights just stalled for way, way, way too long, and it was just kind of unhealthy for the game. So when it comes to them removing it, I think this was a really healthy approach and has really allowed light to have a bit more of a place. And I'll say it on my team, we actually have completely dropped defib from all rounds. I'm actually really grateful that we can do this. This kind of means that we're trying to focus a lot more on just winning our fights. If we can just focus purely on making sure that we win our fights and we don't have to go for any revives, we're fine. If enemies are reviving, that's very often just a free kill. Basically all they have is their weapon. So if they just shot a bunch of bullets, then that's all they have. They have like a couple bullets, they might have to reload right away. So it makes it very easy for us to capitalize on that. So that is why we've kind of dropped it from our team composition. But I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that it is completely dead. We still have it in reserves, and there are definitely times where I think it is worth it. But instead, we're just kind of using double mobility with a goo grenade so that we have a little bit more defense. So that is our current strategy when it comes to playing medium, and we find it's not worth stacking mediums anymore. So another thing is that we have the jump pad and the zipline both on a longer cooldown. So realistically, we might not want to bring both because of the longer cooldown, but I honestly still find that they're still basically S-tier gadgets, so I wouldn't really drop them in that case. Now, another really big thing that has helped shake up the meta is the buff to mesh. Now, the buff to mesh is actually a buff to light, which is why I think HML is fantastic, because if you're going to be bringing in 2 heavies, then that means that you're going to be bringing in double domes, more than likely 1 to 2 mesh shields, which means that the glitch can pop on tons of things, and you have 2 glitches, so you can easily pop them. So I think it is really, really viable to just have a light right now. Another thing that has been shaking up the meta is the whole change to the cloak. Now, I'm gonna keep it a buck. This was not it. I think this was just overtuned. The cloak where it was before, I felt was already the strongest specialization on the class. So the fact that they added this whole feature, I don't know if this was an oversight, but I have been abusing the shit out of this cloak. It is so damn strong, especially when you pair it with a stun. The amount of times that I just sit right next to point and just wait for them and then just stun and instantly plug and just steal people's plugs is crazy. It's really easy to abuse this right now. And even then for defending, I mean, you can sit there basically for your entire cloak charge from the point that you plug it, and you're still going to be invis by the time that people get there. So it's really, really, really strong. If you're running light, I genuinely think you need to be on cloak right now. Unless you're a melee player, then obviously dash is going to be it. But that's where I am seeing the meta right now. So with all these different changes to the gadgets, specializations and stuff, I want to explain basically what the loadout is for each class and kind of give you like a general rule of thumb. Now, this is not going to be the be all end all. You can obviously adapt from here. I just want to give you guys a little bit of a baseline to start when you are trying to adapt to this new meta. If you guys need some ideas on what's good right now, these are definitely a really good starting point. And this is basically what my team is running right now and what team comp we ran in order for me to be the first person to hit diamond. So let's break it down. We're going to start with heavy. So for specialization, we're running mesh shield. With the changes, I find that mesh shield is really, really valuable. And since we actually don't run healing beam, we run dematerializer. That way we can kind of kite a little bit better. I find the mesh allows my heavy to just stay alive a lot more. And that means that as a light, I can do my job so much better. For weapon, we're using the SA-12. I think alternatively, the Shack 50 is actually a pretty good option. It basically plays like an SMG. It is my personal preference for heavy weapon whenever I am on heavy. However, my teammate Kip Kip is much more of an SA-12 prefer. And I do think SA-12 overall is still the best weapon on heavy, but I do have my preferences. For gadgets, we're going to be bringing the RPG, the C4, and the Dome Shield. Now, these are pretty standard. Dome Shield obviously helps you a lot with fights. C4 is fantastic for playing for drop. And then we also have RPG, which is just good for entry and exit damage, just all around really, really useful. Now, things that you could consider in your reserve would be something like anti-grav, which is good for stalling, barricade if you need that extra cover. Honestly, barricade's probably the main thing to swap to. And the lock bolt we've been messing around with a little bit. I do find it to be a little bit underwhelming, and there's a lot of times where I feel like, well, I hit them, they should be locked up, and then obviously they just are instantly out of it. They've already broken out. So unfortunately, lock bolt hasn't really been doing a lot, but when it does work, it feels very impactful. So maybe we'll see where the meta goes for that in the future. Now, for the medium, we prefer running dematerializer over healing beam. I get a lot more value out of kiting with the dematerializer, so that is why we are going to be running it on our team comp. And then on top of that, it just means that we can play different angles. We can play for drop if the C4 didn't work. We can do so much with dematerializer. And when we are fighting, typically you're not sitting back healing. We're just fully taking the fight aggressively. We're not sitting back. We're not, pussyfooting around. We are taking that fight. So that is the reason why we prefer dematerializer, because it allows us to play aggressive and defensive at the same time a lot more effectively than the healing beam would allow us to. Now for weapon, typically we've been running the model 1887, as I find that this is the best when you are just fully engaging and taking the fights. The FCAR is in the slot because that would be the weapon that I prefer. I think of all the ARs, the FCAR is probably one of the best. I think the FAMAS is potentially the best or next best, but FCAR is just in there because that's what's been working the best for me. And then as you see in the gadgets, we do not run any Defibrillator anymore. Since our whole fight is basically we are either taking this fight to its limit and we are just aping this, or we are backing out. That is kind of how we're playing. We don't really feel like the defib really comes in much value now that basically we bring somebody back and they just feel useless. It's just basically another death, which is another 500 for the enemy team, so I do not like running it. So we have double movement, the zipline and the jump pad are fantastic for this. And then after that, we're going to be running the goo grenade. So I find the goo grenade is really, really good. Again, since we don't have a healer and we don't have defib, we need to play our life. So the goo grenade is essentially for those moments where we need to steal and there's not much time left, so we just want to quickly throw it out in order to either stop push, or if we are trying to steal, in order to secure that steal. And it combos quite well with the movement. We can set up slant pads. There's a lot of stuff that goo does, especially when you're opening up a bunch of walls. You could quickly close them, so that is really good. In the reserves, we have frag grenades, as I find that really, really good. And then obviously we have Defibrillator, because realistically, Defibrillator is still good. There might be times where we find, goo or the zip might not be worth it, especially if we're on like Las Vegas. We might not want the zip line, so we might run a frag or maybe defib. And then I have data reshaper in the reserves just because that's something that I like doing, but it's totally up to you what you want to bring there. I just find if there's a time where people are playing some really cheesy like triple turret or a bunch of mines, the data reshaper can come in handy for that. So I just have it in the back pocket for that. But next, we're going to be talking about the light. So I think light is in a really, really good spot right now. And I've been messing around with the new gravity vortex, and I actually think it's really, really good. So I want to say that gravity vortex could potentially become the main gadget. As of now, I am not, but I just kind of want to get to that. We'll get to it in a bit. So cloaking device after the buff is insane. It was already probably the best competitive specialization. There are a few people like Uni who use dash very, very effectively in high elo. And there's basically no grapple players, although I do feel like grapple is pretty good. I know Chickpea has been messing with it a little bit. For weapons, we have the 9.3R. Realistically, the LH1, in my opinion, is the best light weapon, especially with the reduction of visual recoil and the red dot. The LH1 has been absolutely frying, so the LH1 definitely is going to be your go-to most of the time. But the 9.3R is just feeling really, really good. I feel like it plays similar to how the XP used to play, and that was more my preference. So I just enjoy the 9.3R a lot more, but I would say it's probably like an A tier, whereas the LH1 is probably more of like an S tier. So again, personal preference there. For gadgets, we have the stun, the gateway, and the glitch. Now, the stun works really, really well in combination with something like a 9.3R because I want to be pretty close. So I get that stun off, and then I get the pick. Another thing is cloaking device is absolutely insane right now. So what I can do is I can just crouch, sit with cloak right next to a point, and just wait. Once they come by, stun them, plug it. Or I can wait at my own point, wait for them to start stealing, and then stun. Cloak is extremely overtuned right now. It's gonna get nerfed. If it doesn't, then we're in 100% a cloak light meta, and it's gonna be a bunch of cloaks versus other cloaks trying to get the thermal kills. Like, it's gonna be a very interesting meta to sit in. So yeah, cloak right now is just insanely broken, so definitely be abusing it while it's here. I find gateway is kind of mandatory all the time. The glitch has been really, really good because now that mesh is back in the meta, you're seeing a lot of double heavy comps and a lot of heavies in general. So glitch is a fantastic. It's probably one of the best counters to heavy, so that's why we have it in our main gadget. Now for the reserves, I have frag grenade. If we're on a map like Yodo or maybe even Skyway or something like that, where I want to sit a little bit further back and I don't want to be too close to point, I might pull out the LH1 with that red dot, swap out the stun gun for frags, and just sort of sit back and just throw it over and over again. You can go from frag to glitch, frag, then glitch. And then in reserves, we have the thermal vision. So the thermal vision is basically there so that we can counter any enemy lights that we're seeing. It is probably one of the best picks to counter any other cloak lights. We're going to see a huge influx in lights, so if you are playing light, you're gonna need this in your reserve. The thermal vision is going to be mandatory in order for you to pick off the enemy cloak players. Last, we have the gravity vortex. I think gravity vortex has a lot of potential. I've been kind of brainstorming some ideas. I've been messing with it a little bit. It has come in clutch multiple times. I think there's plenty of use cases for it, but I think this is one of those like giga big brain gadgets. I genuinely think I need to sit and just brainstorm a little bit more, start practicing it, and just try to master this, because I think the gravity vortex is going to become meta. I'm probably going to have to make a guide on this because honestly it is a fantastic gadget, but it's just a little bit difficult to explain all of its use cases because I feel like I just keep discovering more and more use cases, so I really need to go in and test some stuff. Now that's basically what my team has been running, and I feel like this is pretty close to what the meta is, but I do want to throw out some alternatives here. So on medium, you can definitely be running healing beam. So I'm going to have kind of the standard healing beam here where we have the frag here with jump pad, defib, the FCAR, or even the model, the FAMAS, whatever you want to bring there. And then you got your healing beam. Now for heavy, I think an alternative is going to be the winch claw. So this is basically the standard loadout that we've seen many, many times before, but we got winch claw instead of mesh. Now, if you're going to be running double heavy, I think this is the way to go. Bring in one winch and then one mesh. This is a really, really nice combo, so definitely something to try out. Now, a big thing that you guys need to focus on in this ranked season is plugging. We are still in a plug meta that has not gone, so make sure that you're constantly chasing after those plugs. Just go from vault to vault, make sure you're getting plugs, make sure you are controlling tempo. Having first place at all times is massive. It means that you have control over the map. Make sure that you are the first person to cash outs to vaults, and having a light is extremely useful, or even bringing in that medium that has both jump pad and zip line. Just map mobility is insane for cash out rounds, and then making sure you have something to swap for the final round in order to win your 1v1s. Now, I don't want to yap on too long. I'm probably going to break down some different loadouts in the future for each class that are really, really viable at high elo. And then I'm probably going to get into some other guides based on how to actually macro and how to play the map correctly. I feel like my team has been doing fantastic at macro. I feel like we've really started to adapt to this meta pretty quickly, especially because we've been playing plug meta and HML for a long time. So now that we are finally in an HML meta, I feel like we have been doing a lot better this season than any other season, so I'm really happy to see that. And so I want to break down some of the macro, and I want to focus a lot on tempo. I probably will make a video discussing completely what tempo is and how to control it. There's a couple other videos. If you guys have any ideas, feel free to throw them at me. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on any future content and any future guides in the finals. Go find your stack, get sweaty, have fun, and I will see you in the finals.
He's on ping.
Both think so.
Okay.
There was one guy.